We are tuned in to fitness and consciousness. Today's episode is the doors of perception. I first heard that phrase from the Doors band. I was probably junior high school, and I found out they got the name from the Aldous Huxley book. And then in just doing some research for the show today, I found out that he got it from poet William Blake, and it was written in between 1790 and 1793, a book called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. So the Aldous Huxley quote from the book is, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern." And of course, he was talking about psychedelics and what he learned from them. As I think about the doors of perception, and I did have experience with psychedelics when I was in high school. There was like one time after high school, still a long time ago. And I have kind of like some mixed feelings on it. I think they can help people. They have helped people. They've given psilocybin to people who were dying and having a hard time with it. And it eased their mind. It made them more comfortable with death, and it's amazing what happens. And also, I don't think that everything that it does is so positive all the time. That's a little bit beyond the scope of what the show is going to be about. I think I may get more into that. We'll see how it goes. What I see is in our doors of perception, thinking of our the door being closed, or there being a doorman, someone out there saying, "Nope, you're not coming in." Just like some club, and the club image is this particular way. And so if you're walking up to that door and you don't fit the image of that club, then the doorman's not going to let you in. And I think we each probably have these doormen, these guardians at the gate that prevent something from coming in that doesn't fit our image. And one thing that I've been watching a little bit lately was Louder with Crowder. He's does these convince me I'm wrong or change my mind events, where he'll set up a desk at maybe it's like at a college campus, or maybe it's outside the White House, and he'll say something that sounds kind of provocative, and then say, "Change my mind." Like there's only two genders, change my mind. Or there's he'll talk about like Trump is not a fascist, change my mind. So there's these things that he sets up, and the people that come up to him, it's not like I always agree with Crowder or always disagree. But what I find interesting is when people are coming up to him, some of them have their minds changed because they learned something. And I think sometimes they're bringing good points. But what I see a lot of, and maybe it's especially like with the more college age people, is they have these doormen at their gates that they don't want to let in these other thoughts. And their thoughts are like one thought deep. And when asked to explain their position more, they don't have the ability. They would rather just say Trump's a fascist. Okay, well, what's a fascist? And he'll have the definition, the dictionary definition, or he'll have them look it up and read the definition. And you find people wanting to change definitions, or like maybe he doesn't fit that definition, but he's still a fascist, or whatever. I'm not necessarily a Trump fan. I'm just illustrating my point of people not having their positions on a firm foundation. They hear something, they want to be part of this group, and maybe their hearts are often in the right place where they want to be on the right side of history. They want to be moral people, but it doesn't always end up that way, even if they repeat this catchy slogan. So what do we let into our mind? So if we look at like the different senses, we have sight, and then there's like the metaphorically sight, what we can see, because blind people can see things also. And as a side note, blind people often use very sighted language, and they'll say, "Oh, I see. Oh, okay, I see. I'm going to watch a movie. Blind people speak like that." But anyway, so like, what do we see? Well, what kind of movies are we watching? What kind of events are we going to? What kind of are we watching things that are happy? Are we just watching that kind of stuff? So we're like looking through these like rose-colored glasses. Oh, everything is great. Or are we watching just horror movies all the time? And I notice on TV, I don't have cable. Actually, I just got a Roku, which, wow, there's a lot of free stuff on there. But I notice a lot of the stuff, even on like the free TV, like sometimes I'll click through the station and almost everything is about murder and crime and it's like, why are people filling their minds with that stuff? I mean, it's okay to be aware of these things that are going on, but what effect does that have on us? So we start to see the world that way, because if all we take in is this negative information, murders and traumas, and then that becomes a big part of our life. It's easy for the hours to add up, and then do you spend most of your free time watching murder and horror movies and do we know people that have that, and they do like to watch a lot of horror movies, and what's their general disposition? What's their outlook on life? And then move on to like the things that we smell. Okay, so that's another door of perception. I'm not going to dig too much into that one, but you can see that like if something like good is cooking, it triggers all these pleasant thoughts and chemicals in our mind. And if there's like rotten flesh or the smell of death or something, it triggers something else. So like, what are the smells that we're around all day? Like when we pick up through our nose, like pheromones, it's like, why are we attracted to this woman? Is it because of her perfume? Maybe. I'd say often not. It's something else. And we move on to taste. So what are we tasting? Are people like uh, smoking? Are they? I don't really have that one like thought out real well. It wasn't one I wouldn't spend a lot of time on. But are we taking in foods that are interesting? I'm personally not somebody that is a foodie, as I guess it's commonly called now. Like somebody that really cares about taste, or they'll travel somewhere because of the food. Why would you fly to another country to eat something? Doesn't make any sense to me. So the spices that I have in my cabinet now are, I think I just ran out of turmeric, but like there's salt and there's pepper. And there might be some cinnamon sticks that, but there's salt and there's pepper. And I might get some turmeric. Uh, That's about it. But some people, you go into their kitchen and they have like all these spices, and they're just like always, they're just into all this different, and that's cool. That's good. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. In fact, I'm saying that that's probably uh, it. It's it's good. People don't have to have one way or another. But personally, I don't really get too into. I'm not big. I don't really like eating very much. So to me, eating is like an inconvenience, and I'm not that into it. We move on to hearing. This is one that I. This is one that I'm into. So I'm a huge music fan. I play guitar. I read song lyrics on the podcast. Not every time, but often. If I don't have a guest, if I do have a guest, I'm not reading them. But the kind of music that we listen to, I think, is just huge. And do the people that are into like death metal and just loud, aggressive, dark music, are they usually pretty happy and everything's pretty calm and cool, or do they get angry a lot? What effect does that anger have on, or what effect does that music have on their anger? I think it has a does have major effect. And when I was younger, I listened to like Metallica, which I think is different. They're not. I wouldn't call them like dark. I mean, yeah, they're heavy metal, but they weren't. I don't know. I haven't really looked back at the lyrics for a long time, but it was some of the first stuff I was playing on guitar were these Metallica songs. Had some cool guitar stuff, and but now I can't really listen to it. And then there's like this workout music. So I can't stand I can't I can't stand a lot of the like poppy music that's at gyms, and I don't go to very many different gyms, but sometimes depending on who picks the music at the gym that I'm at, I can't handle it. And if I'm planning on a workout and that music that I can't stand is on, I'll go home. I'll work out at home, or sometimes I'll try to tough it out. And once I can get to where I can pretty much tune it out. And I did start to bring these headphones, earbuds, or whatever they call them these days. And that I only did that once. I don't really like to be bothered with that either. But man, there's some of that music I just can't stand. That poppy, it's just so shallow. But the music that I do like, And I thought about doing some different like music appreciation shows, and I think with having I don't have the rights to other people's music and stuff. That's why I just read the lyrics usually. But it'd be cool to maybe I could play a certain amount of them and kind of get away with it. I don't know. But anyways, if you look into bands, what I would call like conscious music, and so there's stuff like Estes Tona. I'm not positive how you pronounce his last name, but it's Estes, Estas. His last name is Tonnne. Saw him live in Chicago in December, about 6 weeks ago or so, and man, he's just so good. He has songs that are over an hour long. He's often playing just by himself. He plays like this flamenco style, gypsy kind of, but he uses some effects on his guitar, and he can play. He's just unreal. It's just amazing music to listen to. Now I'm a big fan of like the Grateful Dead and Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. Pink Floyd is my all-time favorite band. I've liked them since I was a real little kid. I'd say probably 7, 8 years old. I started listening to them. I remember the Learning to Fly video on MTV, and it was just awesome. I loved that song. It's still just great. I read the lyrics to that on the show last time, I believe it was. And my classes, my strength and conditioning classes, I play some Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, all the ones I just mentioned. And there's also like the Rocky soundtrack, and there'll be like Native American drumming, like African drumming, music from India, from chanting to. I play like what it would just be called like conscious music, and then sometimes I have like some songs in there that are kind of like inside jokes. Sometimes inside jokes with myself, but there's like some George Michael father figure, and it's just for me, it's just so much more pleasant to listen to, and I think it has an effect on how people, it affects our like vibration, I guess you could say. And like, what other sounds are we allowing, and how does it affect our overall perception? So like, a lot of us maybe are not in a position to do much about it, but what about your work environment? I teach at a gym. I'm a trainer at a couple different places, but I also have what I call my job, and it's a factory, and I like it because it's stable. Personal training can be up and down, and the factory, it's like just a steady thing. I work from 5 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, and then I train in the afternoons and evenings. And there, the sound environment, it's loud. There's all these machines running, and I have earplugs in, and I don't get stressed out by it or anything. And of course, the earplugs help, but not everybody wears earplugs. We're supposed to, but just taking in all that sound and all it's going to affect us. One, we'll lose our hearing, and then that affects how we hear our kids, how we hear our wife. Maybe some people want to lose their hearing so they don't have to hear their wife anymore. Maybe that's why they don't wear earplugs. Okay, I get it. But if you want to hear the nuances of the Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead, or whatever kind of music that you're listening to, yeah, I'm a kind of music um, snob. I have the best taste in music, and nobody else does. But whatever people listen to, it's fine. I would just say it's probably not a good idea to lose our hearing. So, like, what kind of sounds are you around all the time? And would it be better for you to wear earplugs, even if nobody else is? Some people will say they don't like to wear them. You don't have to like it, but you want to hear. And then you can hear the sounds when you're going out to the woods, or even like right now, the snow is melting. I hear it dripping off of my roof. I'm on the second floor. I hear it dropping onto the awning underneath me, and you can hear the birds. And right now my heater just kicked on. You can hear that. I hear the cars driving by. So it's all part of our awareness. So the perceptions, our awareness, it's that hearing, and it's something that we can work on, and we can learn to focus on different things. So if we're listening to, say, like Pink Floyd on cheap radio, and then we listen onto some very high-end radio, you can hear the bass player more. You can hear the keyboard more. You can hear those subtle notes on the guitar more. You can hear better. It's a different experience. Sometimes when I would listen to it and watch, or I would listen to like Jimi Hendrix or whatever. So I was trying to learn the song on guitar, and I would listen to it while I was reading the notes or reading the tablature. It's like, if you don't know what tablature is, it's basically notes, but just for the guitar. It tells you how to play it, basically. And so I would be reading along to the music, and then by reading it, I would hear something that I didn't hear when I wasn't reading along. Like, oh, he plays this note, and it'll be like all these like layers and layers of tracks. So it's like guitar 14 hits the A right here, and I didn't hear that before, but I heard it when I was reading along. So that's kind of an interesting thing to do, because how did I miss it? So, like, speaking of missing things, a lot of what we miss also is in our sight. And now I've noticed it, sometimes I'll ask people if we're like walking through the woods, I'll be like, do you look up or down? And, I'm usually looking up. I like birds, and so I'm usually like looking up. And I look down also. But if you're a tracker, you're probably looking down more. Or if people just have like these different habits, tendencies, or whatever. And so, like, I was with, I guess it's happened a bunch of times. So I'm with a friend out in the woods. I'm like, oh, look at that bird. Look at that woodpecker or whatever. And she's like, oh, look at this frog. I would have walked right by the frog. Sometimes, of course, when I'm walking, I'll see the frogs. I look at the ground also, but I'm usually looking up. And so I would have walked by that frog, and she wouldn't have noticed the woodpecker. But together, I'm able to point out the woodpecker to her, and she pointed out the frog to me. So I can enjoy the frog. I can enjoy and get a better understanding of what's happening. But both of us walking through the woods, we're missing so much. There's so much that we walk right by. And it's interesting what we filter out and what is able to come through our doors of perception. And part of the music thing is like also what we see, and like when we go to live concerts, and I have a buddy that's into like some, like really heavy metal, like dark, heavy um, stuff, and he showed me some videos, and will have like, I mean, he's not a Satanist or anything, but he's a Christian guy, but he listens to this music that is just super dark, and he'll show me a video, and I can't stand to listen to it, and I'm looking at it, and it's all these images that I don't like to see. These scenes that are like just these grotesque scenes. And you see the crowd watching, and then they kind of become that way. They become like psychotic in a way. Like you could say that even like at like Grateful Dead concerts. Grateful Dead's not around anymore. Well, they're touring with John Mayer, which is an interesting choice, but he's really good. And what are the images that they see? You look around and you see everybody's happy and dancing around and loving each other. And when you see these heavy, dark, satanic concerts, it's not like everybody's smiling and having a nice time with their buddies. It's like they're all in a craze. It's really strange to me. But we don't all have to be the same. It wouldn't be very interesting if we were. So the visuals of our music make a big difference also. Then we move on to touch. It's an important thing, like the right touch. And like from the time we're born, we want to be held by our moms, and we want this nice touch. It's not like when we're born, we don't want to people to hit us. But then sometimes kids, they end up getting hit. We can call it a spanking. They can say that's like good for discipline and stuff. I disagree. But like, what kind of like touch are people being exposed to? And hopefully your partner always has the right one. We can have different ones at different times that are, people like different stuff in that way. But like the violence, it doesn't end after the one punch. Like, so if somebody takes a punch, it doesn't stop after the punch. It lingers on, and it goes on. And so if people are in these relationships, and it definitely goes both ways, women will hit their men will hit their women. It goes both ways for sure. And how does that affect our perception as a whole? And then there's like martial arts. So I have friends, and we kick each other and punch each other and throw each other on the ground and do chokes and arm bars and leg locks and neck cranks and shoulder locks, and we bend each other in the ways that we're not supposed to bend, but it's good. We want that. We like it when that happens. But when it's against our somebody's will, then it's a different thing. And I would say, if you have kids, it's important to get them into some kind of martial art, wrestling, um, at an early age. And there's something about that sense of touch, something about like learning jujitsu, where like I had this thing in my mind where if you want to be a yoga teacher and do adjustments on people, jujitsu should be part of your training. And I don't think it's enough to just get adjusted by someone else. I mean, that could be part of it. But I've seen some crazy adjustments in yoga classes that are just stupid, extremely harmful. It's like, what are you doing? It makes no sense. But for some reason, they think it does make sense, in the sense of, yeah, I have no idea why they think it makes sense. Well, there's something about like transforming transcending the body. You know, you have pain and you just like transcend the pain, and like, oh, here's his posture. You know, I'd be a little bit more spiritual if I could get both legs behind my head, not just the one. So I'm going to have this dude crank it behind my head, and then I can hold my hands together and namaste and pretend that this is something that makes some kind of sense. It doesn't. If you can get your feet behind your head, then okay. I think it has absolutely nothing to do with yoga, or you can stretch the definition and say that it does, but in my mind, it doesn't, and it's harmful, and it's actually against yoga. It's one of the things that's against it, ahimsa. It's non-harming. So why would you harm yourself? It's ridiculous. It's one of the reasons. I have a friend of mine. I go to her yoga classes sometimes. It's been a little while, and she doesn't do the thing where you just try to twist somebody's head around, or their both legs behind their back, tie them together and stuff. She doesn't do that. But I was going to this yoga school, and this guy was supposed to be like, some people referred to him as the teacher's teacher. And like, it was weird. I ended up like teaching martial arts at his school and stuff for a while. And he was actually going to let me go through, he was encouraging me. He wanted me to go through his teacher training for free. And it would take over 1,000 hours of training to get his 500-hour certification. I've talked a little bit about that before. It's a little bit beyond the scope of, or maybe it's actually right in line with these doors of perception. It is in line with it. So here's a little bit about that. So I was going to this place, and I went there originally because I drove by there all the time. I was driving a cab at the time. And this friend of mine, she had uterine fibroids, and she had a lot of pain and bleeding, and she was having a really hard time finding anything that helped. Like something might help a little bit for a little while, and then it'd be back to extreme pain, and she just couldn't. So I kept seeing this school, and it's like yoga and Ayurveda. I'm like, okay, I've been reading about Ayurveda for a while, and I'm going to call and see if I didn't even know it was a he at the time. I was going to call and see if they knew anything about uterine fibroids and treatments for that. So when I called, he answered the phone, and he said, basically, yes, they do, but it's a whole drawn out process of lifestyle changes and all sorts of stuff. Well, somehow or another, I ended up going to the school and taking yoga classes there. And at first, I thought he was pretty good. And then it was like, I don't think this guy really is very good. He might know a lot of stuff, but something wasn't right. He ended up being a creepo, and he was like doing massages and being creepy with the women during the massages and doing uh, inappropriate things. And he was one that was like twerking people's legs behind their head, like using a lot of force. Like if he did it at jujitsu class, it'd be super inappropriate to do it that way at a jujitsu class, let alone a yoga class. But I don't remember how long I went there. Um, but other people's perception was he was this great yoga teacher. And you have other yoga teachers saying that. So if, say, there is a yoga teacher that goes there and she thinks he's great, then she'll tell somebody else. And so maybe that someone else will go there and say, oh, yes, this person said he was great. I went there. Yes, he's great. But it doesn't really mean that he is. And so more and more come there, and it was just bizarre. It's just really bizarre. So the perception was the way that they see this person, the way that they're perceiving this guy as this great being, yoga teacher, was really disturbing. And where was time when, so I pretty much quit going there except to teach my classes. And I was teaching classes like on Saturday mornings or something like that. And he asked me to have a meeting. And so we were sitting down talking, and he said, I know you see me as just a guy, but I'm thinking, well, yeah, you're just a guy. But to him, this is a strange thing because he has other people see him as this great yogi. And here I am. I've been studying yoga for 25 years now. And I'm looking at him 20 years at the time. And I'm looking at him like, yeah, you're just a dude. You're just a guy. And that seemed to bother him. So he wanted me to start going to the classes more. And then he's saying that I can go through his teacher training for free. And I was already going through some of the stuff because you got to learn more about Ayurveda. You have to learn more about Sanskrit. You have to learn. So I was digging into this stuff, but it was really strange how people perceived him. And so I would really caution against that when you go to a yoga class. A teacher, just a woman, just a man. It doesn't mean they're not great, or it doesn't mean that they don't know what they're doing. But sometimes we project upon them a greatness that is delusional both ways. Some of them are absolutely delusional about their status. Not all of them, of course. There's good ones. But it seems to be a profession that is delusional. Yeah, I stand by that. What's next? I wrote down thinking. So thinking as a part of our thinking and knowing, I wrote kind of together. So part of, is thinking, perception. Yeah, I think sort of, yes. And knowing. So the difference between like thinking and knowing. Like I was watching yesterday, it was Brian Cox, the physicist, on the Joe Rogan podcast. And he wasn't talking about religions exactly specifically, but he did like get into like some of that and like the soul. And he's like, here's stuff that we know. You know, science isn't what we think. It's about what we. Here are the things that we know so far. Here's what we've figured out. And of course, there's a lot that they haven't figured out. But there's measurements. You know, like somebody can say, "Well, I don't believe in the Big Bang." He goes, "Well, actually, we have a picture of it. We have a picture of it." And it's fascinating to challenge my own mind and my own thinking against someone like that, who is a hell of a lot smarter than me in so many ways. But just, you know, the physicists, like, here's how things really are. And there's still theory and there's still stuff they don't know. And he doesn't pretend to know everything. But it's like, so when you're have like, say, an a less scientific model of how things are, and yoga fits into that. Yoga is a science. I do believe that yoga is a great science. I studied all the time. I have all kinds of yoga books. I'm studying all the time. I usually hashtag yoga on Instagram. I believe that I practice yoga pretty much all day, every day. Not the kind where I'm doing like up dog, down dog, and some of that, sure. But to me, that has really, the postural yoga to me has very little to do with the real yoga. But anyways, I do believe that yoga is a science. The meditation, the right mind, learning how to like really perceive things as they are. But then when we get into like what is called like the woo, like and there's gaps in the scientific knowledge, but like yoga seems to be something where somebody can say something that it has absolutely no proof whatsoever. Pass that on, and then that next person in the teacher training says, yeah, here's this, 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 and this. I have absolutely no direct experience of this, 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 and this, but that's what this person told me. That's what this book says. So that's what I'm going to say too. And it's this, 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 and this is a bunch of baloney. And I've had a lot of esoteric experiences myself. Maybe a lot of them were delusional. Maybe a lot of them were, I was certainly wrong about some. For instance, I was driving home. A buddy of mine was following me. I forget where we were, but there was this part of town out by our zoo, and the road kind of like loops around, and I know the area well. I've had several jobs where I had to drive around. I know the city very well. I mean, you could just pluck me out from wherever I am and drop me anywhere in the city, and as long as I can see like a couple numbers in a road sign, I'll know where I am in a very short time and be on my way home or wherever it is I want to go. But I had this thing happen where like this road, it makes like a loop. And we were driving and I drove and I turned to go towards town, like towards downtown. And then I found myself going away from downtown. And I'm like, what happened? Like that was so weird. And I turned around and my buddy and I get back to my house and I'm like, man, that was so weird. It's like, I know I turned this way and I know that way was correct. But it turned out it was just like this weird thing. I was just wrong about it. I should have turned the other way. I turned the wrong way. I thought I turned the right way, and then I was mysteriously headed the wrong way. But it turned out. But then after I like drove on the same road again or whatever, and I figured out that no, I just turned the wrong way. the road loops around and it kind of does this weird thing where it just threw me off for a second. But I thought this like great mysterious thing happened to me, but it didn't. I just flat out turned the wrong way. I have had, no doubt, some experiences that are so far beyond chance, so far beyond rational, or the rational explanation is very bizarre. I'll put it that way, if that makes sense. The rational explanation is very bizarre. There was one thing that happened. I don't think I've told this story on the show, but I had something really, really crazy this one time. That was a bunch of times. I had something crazy happen. But I was driving in the cab, and I had these two girls in the back seat, and they were talking, and I pour some more coffee here. Was driving, and they're in the back seat, and they're just talking, and they were both like mature women. That makes, if you've ever driven a cab, you know that's a good. That's not a bizarre way to start out the conversation, because sometimes we pick people up that are nuts. But these are two girls that were just like cool, calm, adult acting women, and I felt like this thing like pop out of the top of my head, hit the headliner of the car, hit me in the head again, and like fall down my shoulder and then down onto the onto the floorboard. And maybe to get more specific, I don't know that I necessarily felt it pop out of my head, but I felt it hit my head. That first part, I'm not super clear on, but I felt it hit the top of my head, and then it rolled down my arm and chest down onto the floorboard. And my ears and my like vision got really weird. And I was like, what the hell? And I could still hear them, but it was like muffled. And I knew that they didn't miss a beat. So even though at that point I couldn't understand the word, I was trying to make sense of what was happening, because all of a sudden I felt so strange. And I knew that they didn't miss a beat in their conversation. And so I'm like, okay, that was weird. And so I'm like looking at the window, and the window was cracked just a little bit. So cause I'm thinking, okay, well, if I drive a lot with the windows down, and I've been, hit in the face with like rocks and stuff from people driving by or whatever. And it is not like this at all. But I was like looking, I was like, okay, that was really strange. So the windows were cracked just a little bit. There was no way a rock could come in, hit the ceiling, hit me and hit me in the head. Just there's no way that angle was possible. And I mentioned the girls being reasonable, like adult acting, because maybe if it was like two young guys, maybe I would thought that they flipped a rock or something and it hit the roof and it hit me. But that wasn't. It didn't seem like that was not the case either. These are not the kind of girls that would just like flips. And I knew that they didn't miss a beat in their conversation. And I was thoroughly freaked out. And I'm like, what the? And my hearing was all muffled, and my vision was like, and I'm still driving. I'm driving down the road with them in the car, and I knew I was still driving okay, even though my senses were just distorted. And So I get them to wherever they were going, and I look at this rock, and I wouldn't touch it. I was thoroughly freaked out, and I wouldn't touch it. And it looked kind of like a small acorn, kind of like a little pineal gland, and it was like this, like a stone, rough acorn-looking thing, very small, um, maybe a less than a half inch long, and I wouldn't touch it. And I went to the car wash, and I vacuumed it out. And I wish I would have kept it now. I mean, looking back, I wish I would have kept it. If that ever happens again, I'm keeping it. But I was that freaked out about it. And there's no way it came in through the window. It really did not seem like these were the type of people that would flip something at me. And if they did, I would think there would be a beat missing out of their conversation. But I just knew that there wasn't. And the effect it had on my senses at the time. That was the only time where I ever felt. I don't know if it was the only time I ever felt quite like that, but it was an extreme occurrence, an extreme event. I've never had anything like that happen before or since. And I tried looking it up to see if anybody else had these experiences, and I did ask this shaman. I told her about it, and she said that it means something like my way is the way of stones, and I'm not sure that I don't know how much I got out of that really, but I really wish I would have kept that stone or whatever the hell it was, but I wouldn't even touch it. And I'm not somebody to get like freaked out real easy. You know, like the thing where I was talking about turning the wrong way, but I thought I turned the right way, and it was still nothing like we're not even in the same ballpark. And once I figured out what really happened, I accepted it. I'm not trying to force a mystical experience on one that just wasn't. If there's an explanation, then I'll take it. And so, you know, getting back to the yoga thing, yoga seems to be a hub, is that the right word? To attract people that are into or susceptible to these woo explanations. So if there was somebody that could, you know, explain scientifically that this or that isn't so, and then what you're teaching is actually not only not supported by science, but actually debunked by science. I think it's also important to keep an open mind because there are things that just defy explanations. But when you hear somebody talking like a Brian Cox or Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, a good example is like microwaves, like microwave ovens. And like I quit using a microwave oven. I was reading about it, and the science of it was, it like nukes your food, and it makes your food into like this like nuclear waste, or like whatever kind of explanation it was. And like my sister, who she went to some like event at a library, and they were talking about it, and like, oh, using microwaves is a harmful thing. And so I was like, I'm kind of believing that. And then I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about it, like, no, that's just not how it works. Okay. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson could be wrong about some stuff. He's not a perfect being. But if he's saying something about science and somebody else that is not a physicist is saying something, I'm going to trust Neil deGrasse Tyson, even if it's against my what I currently thought. So he's saying it, and I'm like, oh, I still don't have a microwave. But I wouldn't tell somebody now that they're harmful to use because Neil deGrasse Tyson said they're not. But he did say something like it changes something about like the water molecule, like it reverses something. And so that's why some things don't taste right after you microwave them. But he, like, the idea of them being harmful to the food was ridiculous to him. So I'm on his team then, although he could be wrong. So moving on, where are we? So like these explanations that we have, these ways that we perceive things, and like the way that we see, getting back to the Doors band, the Doors. I remember watching them in high school, like on VHS tapes. So I'm 39, so I'm watching these tapes with my friends, and I'm in high school, and he's in his, say, like mid-20s. So he's older than us, and he's so cool, and he's in this awesome band playing this awesome music. And then when I was watching him later on, when I was in my mid-30s or whatever, well, I'm older than him. And so the way that I'm looking at him is different than I was looking at him when I was in high school. I still like a lot of the Doors stuff, but the way that I see him is different. I'm looking at him through the eyes of a 39-year-old that has this much life experience instead of the 15-year-old that had that much life experience. Neither one is right or wrong. It's not the same. And another thing that I was thinking about was the way I perceived the movie Dazed and Confused when I was in high school. And the way that I perceived it, I tried watching it, or I watched it a few years ago. So in high school, these people are our age, or they're playing our age, and then there's the guy that's a little bit older, and then so it was all making so much sense. That movie has awesome cars in it. If you're into cars, it's a real cool one to watch. A lot of really awesome cars in it. But when I look at it now, it's different. Because I don't smoke weed, I don't drink, I don't do any kind of mind-altering substances but back when I did, and we're watching people that are kind of like us, and then now it's just a different thing. So it's funny to look at it from the perspective of a 39-year-old instead of the perspective of a 15-year-old. I'm more than twice the age that I was then. And so it's interesting to see Jim Morrison, who he used to be older than me, or older, and he died when he was 27, I believe. He was in that like 27 club. A lot of musicians, anyways. But it's just interesting how we perceive somebody in their mid-20s when we're a teenager, because they're the ones that haven't figured out. Now you get too much older than that, now they don't know how it is. They're old. But when you're 17 and you're looking at the guy that's 25 and he's in this cool band, well, we can dig that. That's what we're listening to. But somebody in their 50s, oh, come on now. But now when I'm, being 39, I noticed a lot of the concerts I've been going to, there's not a lot of teenagers at them anymore. It's all a bunch of old people. But we're seeing some amazing music. So and I like the same music that I liked back then. My I've added to it, but I haven't changed. My favorite bands are the same favorite bands I've had since early high school. So I think I'm going to start to wrap this up here. End up kind of going some different directions than what I planned on. I was trying to uh, wrote out this thing and this outline. See what I missed here. So our perception. Well, there's the saying, they say it's like a Cherokee saying. I don't know if it really is or not, but about feeding the two wolves, or the wolves rather. I'll read it here. A Cherokee elder was teaching his young grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it's between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, self-doubt, and ego. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. This same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person, too. The boy thought about it for a minute, then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The elder simply replied, "The one you feed." Let me read a couple other things. I'm not going to do a lot of explaining. Here's a song that David Gilmour wrote. Following the path as it leads towards the darkness in the north, weary strangers' faces show their sympathy. They've seen that hope before. But if you want to stay for a little bit, rest your aching limbs for a little bit. Before you, the night is beckoning, and you know you can't delay. You hear the night birds calling you, but you can't catch the words they say. Close your ears and eyes, be on your way. Mist is swirling, creatures crawling. Hear the roar get louder in your ears. You know the folly was your own, but the force behind can't conquer all your fears. And if you want to stay for a little bit, rest your aching limbs for a little bit. Before you, the night is beckoning, and you know you can't delay. You hear the night birds calling you, but you can't catch the words they say. Close your ears and eyes, be on your way. Pull your thoughts back many years to the time when there was life with every morning. Perhaps a day will come when the light will be as clear as that morning. And if you want to stay for a little bit, rest your aching limbs for a little bit. Before you, the night is beckoning, and you know you can't delay. You hear the night birds calling you, but you can't catch the words they say. Close your ears and eyes, be on your way. Written by David Gilmour. The urge to escape from selfhood and the environment is in almost everyone, almost all the time. I think that's Aldous Huxley. This is another one from The Doors of Perception. But the man who comes back through the door in the wall will never be quite the same as the man who went out. He will be wiser but less cocksure, happier but less self-satisfied, humbler in acknowledging his ignorance, yet better equipped to understand the relationship of words to things, of systematic reasoning to the unfathomable mystery which it tries forever vainly to comprehend. The ancient poets animated all sensible objects with gods or geniuses, calling them by the names and adorning them with the properties of woods, rivers, mountains, lakes, cities, nations, and whatever their enlarged and numerous senses could perceive. And particularly, they studied the genius of each city and country, placing it under its mental deity, till a system was formed, which some took advantage of and enslaved the vulgar by attempting to realize or abstract the mental deities from their objects. Thus began priesthood, choosing forms of worship from poetic tales, and at length they pronounced that the gods had ordered such things. Thus men forgot that all deities reside in the human breast. And I'll end this by talking about like the rose-colored glasses. Some people say they see things through rose-colored glasses, but there's also seeing things through the dark-colored glasses. And sometimes we see other people in these ways. So to perceive someone clearly as they are is not so easy. And when you see the partner that, or who you hope to be your partner, what kind of glasses are you wearing? What are you listening to? What are you filtering out? And are you looking at them with rose-colored glasses? Are you just ignoring the things that you should be acting on? Or are you seeing firstly what you don't like? When you see somebody, you're like, oh, look at her hair. It's so stupid. Oh, I hate that dress. Oh. And I hear people do this sometimes. And it's like, why do you hate that dress? And, I've joked about it. We were watching this movie and this guy had like this kind of like a mohawk, but it was like different. And I kind of like joked that I was upset about his hair. Really, I wasn't. I couldn't care less what kind of hair somebody has. I was just making the joke. But some people they really think like that. They judge people by these things. And so I think we need these doormen. We need that bouncer at the door of our perceptions. What are you going to choose to watch? What are you going to choose to listen to? How are you going to touch? How are you going to allow yourself to be touched? And listen to good music. Don't listen to bad music. Listen to good stuff, like the stuff that I told you about. And our perceptions, lastly here, the masks that we put on to alter someone else's perception of us. So there's the rose-colored glasses, but there's also our rose-colored cloaks. We wear these things, oh, look at me. And be careful to be able to use your decoder glasses to see through those things, to see through that rose-colored cloak. It's not so easy because the people that we're looking at and talking to and our partners, they're not just constant. They're not just a constant. They're up and they're down, and their minds are changing. Their bodies are changing. Their perception is changing over time. So we need to keep looking at people as trying to perceive them as they are. And I think I'll end it at that. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. The show is growing. The analytics showed last month, January, was twice as many people as December. And I believe that's the first time. It may have happened at the very beginning of the show, but the year is just about a year old. And it's usually more and more every month. But last month, was almost doubled for the listens. And that was really cool to see. And I'm going to keep going. I have some awesome guests coming up. I'll be doing more shows by myself. If you want to get a hold of me about the show, send me an email, fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com.